In front of your dead mother? My guy, my dude, calm down. Calm your hormones. Please, I'm sorry, Anne. You deserve so much more than this.
Didn't I make you laugh? Didn't I make you smile?
Hi friends, it's Rory, and today it's another month, which means another wrap up. I don't know why I'm doing all this with my arms. I just woke up, so I'm very excited. Anyways, so let's just get right into it. This month I read 5 books, which was, in my opinion, a bad reading month. I don't know what happened. I just didn't feel like reading this month. But of the 5 that I did read, I had 1 5-star read, 2 4-star reads, and 2 2-star reads. So let's just go ahead in order of the books that I read. So the first book I read in the month was Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. This is the Owl Crate edition of the book. And this book was made for me, basically. So the story is about a girl named Maya who is a seamstress, and she wants to be a royal tailor. But after a war in her country, where 2 of her brothers are killed and 1 of her brothers is disabled, her father, who is not under the best health, is called to become a royal tailor at the palace. Naturally, he can't go, but also she can't go because women are not allowed to be tailors. And so to help, or in order to save her father, she dresses up as her brother and goes in his stead. But when she gets there, she finds out that there's a competition to become the royal tailor, and it's a lot of hard work to get there. And then once she is the royal tailor, she has to go on a dangerous quest in order to make 3 impossible dresses. So, like I said, this book was basically made for me. If you've been on my channel for a little while, you know that I am a seamstress in my off time. But also Mulan is one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. And so the fact that this is basically the 2 of them mixed in one, I knew for a fact it was going to end up being a good book for me. You know that feeling when you just like hold a book and you start to read it and it's got a concept that you love, and it's got like you start it and you're really already loving it and you know it's going to be a good book. That's how I felt with this. Now, apparently there's a controversy with this. I'm not entirely sure what it is. I personally enjoyed this. So let's go ahead and get talking about what I loved about this. First of all, as a seamstress, hearing people talk about making clothes and embroidering was very interesting to me. I loved it. But one of the big reasons why I loved this was the romance. It was just beautiful and I loved it. So the romance is between obviously Maya and Eden, who is a court sorcerer, I believe is enchanter. Court enchanter, that's what they called him. I read this book at the beginning of the month, so I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details, but I remember now. And at first he's the only one who knows that she's a girl, and then he ends up going on the quest for her, and I'm gonna get a little bit into spoilers, but some of the lines for this book, for this romance specifically, there's a line that made me actually scream. It's Maya, and she says it to Eden, and she goes, "The sun and moon only see each other one day out of the entire year. Even if it is only 1 hour or 1 day, I would rather be with you for that time than not at all." And I fucking screamed in the middle of work quietly. You know that type of scream that you make when you can't be very loud, but you have to let your emotions out? And I was just like, I did that. And it makes it even better because earlier in the book, Eden told her that he would move the sun and the moon if it meant being with her, and I just... So yeah, I really, really loved the romance. But along with that, there were just a whole bunch of other really beautiful lines, especially when she's talking about her family. Like her brother is paralyzed, or not paralyzed, but he breaks both of his legs in the war. And when she goes to take some of his clothes so she can pretend to be him, he catches her, and like he tries to like really quickly teach her how to be a boy, and or how to like act like a boy and things like that. And they make an agreement, and he says that he will take a step for every day that she's gone. And it's really beautiful. And even like the characters that I didn't like, they had, like, with the exception of the Emperor, who's an absolute douche canoe and I hate him, but the reason that there's a royal a competition for the royal tailor spot is that the Emperor and the daughter of the leader of the people that they were at war with for so long are in an arranged marriage, and she does not want to be in it. So she's trying to find ways to like push off the wedding because she's in love with one of her father's men. And even though I really disliked her, there were parts when it pulled my heartstring for her. Like, I really did feel bad for her, especially because I knew how bad the Emperor was. But anyways, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The reason I only gave it 4 is that there were a couple of parts where the pacing got really weird, and also there were just a couple of things that weren't explained fully enough, and I wish they had gone a little bit more into what the religion that they follow is, because a big part of the quest for the 3 impossible dresses that they do is based on their religion, and I kind of wish that I had more of like a basis on what it is. So the next book that I read in the month was The Belen King by Laura Anderson. As I mentioned in my 6th tag, I am a historian with a specialization especially in the Tudor time period, and Anne Boleyn is one of my favorite historical figures of all time, and so this kind of fit right up my alley. It is a alternate history where the son that Anne Boleyn miscarried before she was beheaded was never a miscarriage, and in fact was a healthy son who is now Henry IX, although his friends and family refer to him as Will. Now, all that being said, I didn't really like this book. I gave it 2 stars. Basically, the summary of it is that this is after Henry has died. Will is 17 at this point, and he is still under a what's it called? I can't for the life of me remember what it's called because I'm a bad historian, but where he is really only king in name, and he has a council, and basically his uncle, George Belen, is really the one who's calling the shots and telling him what to do. This all takes place right before his 18th birthday, basically the year before his 18th birthday. Along with this, there is Elizabeth, who is naturally in love with Robert Dudley, and Will's best friend, Dominic, who is his best friend and a soldier, and he becomes an advisor for Will. And then the main character is Minette, who is the daughter of Anne Boleyn's best friend, favorite lady-in-waiting, who became Anne Boleyn's ward when her mother died young. And she is back after being Anne Boleyn's, one of her ladies, for training to be Princess Elizabeth's lady-in-waiting. And those are the 4 main characters. Along with this, in this book, there is a murder mystery and a plot by Mary, King Henry's daughter, and their half-sister, in order to disinherit Will from the throne by proving that he is not the son of Henry VIII. He is in fact the son of George Belen. And this book is really, really hard for me to talk about because even though I overall didn't like it, I gave it 2 stars, I liked parts of it. So I loved everything to do with Elizabeth. I thought that the writer got her down to a T. They talk about how she was very calculating, how she was smart, how she had a air of politics, but at the same time was not allowed to really enjoy those things. And I especially think that the relationship between Elizabeth and Robert Dudley were done well. Another character that I really enjoyed was Dominic. He had a story where basically his father forced his mother into a marriage even though she wanted to be a nun, and they had their several children, but Dominic is the only one that survived, and he worries that he will force his future wife to into a marriage that she does not want, and so he wants any future relationship that he has for her to come to him willingly. The trouble is he's in love with Minette, and when it comes to the relationship between Minette and Dominic, I really actually enjoy it. I think that it's very cute because she, has feelings you can tell from the beginning of the book. And they slowly go through, and they are trying to do things naturally, and he doesn't want to push her, and it's very, very cute. Now, the trouble comes when it comes to Will. I don't really like him. I liked him in the beginning of the book. I was like, oh yes, this, young prince, he's, coming into his own. The issue is in that he falls in love with Minette as well, and that's where I really dislike this. This love triangle is garbage. William falls in love with her so fast, like legitimately has nothing to do with her. Like for the majority of this book, he has a mistress who has a daughter, and that's chill. But then this is after his 18th birthday. They are at war with France, and Elizabeth is the regent in charge. Regency, that's what it's called. Anyways, and Elizabeth is the regent while he is away at war with France, and Anne, their mother, falls down the stairs and eventually dies due to her injuries. So he misses the death by very short time. Like he is literally racing to the house, and he hears the bell basically saying that Anne has died. He gets there, he goes into the room to see her, and Minette comes in, and then they make out in front of your dead mother. My guy, my dude, calm down, calm your hormones, please. I'm sorry, Anne, you deserve so much more than this. Anyways, and then after, he starts to read the letters between his father and his mother and decides that he's in love with Minette. And so when he went to war, the plan was to ask for Mary, Queen of Scots' hand in marriage, and so that they could unite England and Scotland. And at the time, Mary, Queen of Scots was engaged to one of the French princes, and so the plan was to get that dissolved so that they could then he could then marry her, and it's all very political. Instead, because he's decided he's in love with Minette, he gets engaged and betrothed to the eldest French princess who is at the time 11, and because by the time she will be able to marry him, he will have hopefully been able to marry Minette instead. And it's just one of those love triangles where you know who she's gonna end up with. Like, she's gonna end up with Dominic. I haven't even looked at the other two synopsises, and I already know that she's gonna end up with Dominic. And yeah, the other thing is that the murder mystery and the conspiracy with Mary the First are both interesting, but the space between them, like, the murder happens in the beginning. You don't find out who murders her until the epilogue, and the characters don't even find out who murdered her. You find out because it's another person. And honestly, I wasn't expecting who it was, and that kind of made me want to read the second book of this, which I didn't want to do, but now I'm kind of like, I wonder if that's going to have consequences. But along with that, the plot for the overthrow of Will doesn't even really start until the last third. So there's just a lot of empty space in this book. That being said, I do kind of want to read the sequel. Anyways, now that I've gone far too long into this, it's going to be way too much editing. Okay, the third book that I read was Avalon High by Meg Cabot, and I read this for my series where I read books that I loved as a child, and then read them as an adult to see if they're still good and if I would recommend them for my nieces and nephews to read in the future when they're at that reading level. So I'm not gonna go into a whole lot of it. Basically, the most basic plot that I can explain is that this girl, Ellie, is her two parents are professors, and they are taking a sabbatical so they can both write books. They're medieval professors who both have a focus on King Arthur's time period and story, and they move to a town outside of Washington, D.C., and Ellie starts to realize that this town is very weird and it may have more connections to King Arthur than she thought before. I gave that book 2 stars. Like I said, I'm gonna have a video in my throwback review series on this coming up soon, so I'm not gonna say a lot, but yeah, 2 stars. The book I read after that was Becoming by Michelle Obama, which I gave 5 stars. Becoming was probably my favorite book of the year. I loved it a lot. Naturally, it is the story of Michelle Obama from where she came from, her childhood in Chicago, up to meeting Barack Obama, them getting married, all the way to the end of Barack Obama's presidency. And a little bit after, there's an epilogue where she talks about after. And it's really the story of Michelle Obama. And it was very emotional for me. I teared up several times. I cried twice while I read the book. I listened to the entire thing on audiobook, and I highly recommend it. It is narrated by Michelle Obama herself, and just the way that she says things and the way that she writes, like, she will bring up something in the most casual way that will cut straight to your bones. It's so good. But this book was also very interesting for me personally because I come from a family, in the nicest of ways that I can say, where Barack Obama's presidency was seen as the worst thing to ever happen to America. Take what you will of that. And ironically, at the time, I finished the book the day before Thanksgiving, and then the day after Thanksgiving, if you follow me on Twitter, my dad did things that hurt me. And so while I was reading this book, I learned a whole bunch of things because I had never known a lot about, like, the election for Barack Obama's presidency and things that happen with that. On the good side, I had only ever seen the bad side. And things like Barack Obama's previous political roles like when he was a senator and when he was in the state's senate and things like that. And it was a very emotional learning for me, because it really made me look at my own personal family and be like, there's clearly a reason why I didn't learn these things. But along with that, it made me look back on the Obama presidency and think about kind of where we were at the time. It really made me miss the Obama presidency, let me tell you. On the good note, Becoming by Michelle Obama is basically Michelle Obama roasting her husband for 15 hours. The audiobook is 19 hours, but it takes about 4 hours before he even comes in. And from the moment he comes in, she's roasting him. And to the point where Michelle Obama posted a picture the day before Thanksgiving, I'll post it here, of the whole family basically saying, "Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." And I looked at Obama in this picture, and the first thing that I could say is, wow, look at that fucking Hawaiian nerd. Because I'd been listening to his wife roast him for 15 hours. Becoming by Michelle Obama is 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend it, especially if you come from a family who does not support the Obama presidency for one reason or another. You're going to learn a lot of interesting things. And the last book that I read, I actually finished it last night, was Soul of Stars by Ashley Poston. This is the second book in the Heart of Iron duology, of which the first is Throne of Iron, I believe. I gave that book 5 out of 5 stars, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. So a slight drop in rating, but I still really love this book. This is the story of Anna, who is a orphan who is raised on a ship called the Dossier, and who is in love with a robot called D09, who she calls Di. And she finds out through the plot of the first one that she is the lost empress of the kingdom that she lives in. The story is based on Anastasia, so if you know the movie Anastasia, you basically know the plot of Heart of Iron, the basic plot. Along with that, there are two characters in it who are named Rob and Jax, who are in love and beautiful, but I'll get to that. Jax is the lost czar from his people, and the czar is basically someone who, when they touch you, they can see your future, but when they do, they lose some of their own life force. And he ran away because he didn't want to die young. And Rob is his older brother, was going to be the next emperor, even though in their kingdom the emperor or empress is someone who can wear the iron crown without rusting it. It's a magical metal where only those who are worthy are able to touch it without rusting it, and despite the fact that when he touches it, he does rust it. He is the highest position, and so he's going to be the next king. Rob, meanwhile, doesn't really care. He just wants to find out more about his father, who died on the night that the ruling family was all murdered. Now, the sequel takes off after the first one, and so I do have to spoil it a little bit. So in the first one, it's discovered that metals are the souls of people who died in the plague that used to happen in the kingdom, and Di is the son of the man who invented the metals. His name was Dimitri, and he was put in a metal body to make him look like how he did when he was still alive, still human, and he was taken over by the Great Dark, which is the basically a destructive darkness who destroys kingdoms and destroys galaxies, basically. And he was taken over. So this one starts from there. Dai is the emperor, still under control of the Great Dark. Anna has been murdered, although she did survive the attack. And they are trying, or she is currently trying to save both Dai and defeat the Great Dark. And yeah, this book is really good. Anna and Dai are cute, but the real savior of this book, honestly, is Rob and Jax. I love them so much. I tweeted about them a lot when I first started out because they were so fucking cute, and just the dynamic of being in love but not being able to touch is one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite tropes, but it's so like nuance. Basically, anytime that you can make a Pushing Daisies reference for me is going to mean that I love it, hence why I like Blue and Gansey from the Raven Cycle. But this one is really true, and even though they can't touch, they're very clearly in love with each other, and they flirt a lot. Like one time Jax talks about, or Rob talks about how the first time he met Jax, the ship they were on was falling, and Jax just offhandedly goes, "You could really say that I fell for you." And I'm just anyways, and they're fantastic. The same as with freaking Eden and Maya from Spin the Dawn. They have a lot of very, very cute moments, and it's great. It's so good. If this was just Rob and Jack's story, honestly, I would probably have given it 5 out of 5 stars. But the reason I gave it only 4 out of 5 stars is that there is a lot of really confusing things where I had to constantly go back and recheck myself. Like, there are several times where someone dies, but then they don't really die, and that's annoying. And if I really, really cared about that, I probably would have rated this book lower, but I love the characters, the found family trope, and everything else. So despite that, I still gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I really, really enjoy the fact that this is a duology and it is not a trilogy, because I think that it is good as just 2 books. And those were the books that I read this month. Like I said, I had a bad reading month, but I already have plans for what I'm going to read for December. It is actually a video that is coming very, very soon, and I'm very excited. In the meantime, as always, there's a link down below to where you can register to vote. Make sure your voice is heard in your state, local, and federal elections, and election season is coming up, so make sure that you are registered. And I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye!